The second closed beta for Aniimo has been going on for about a week at this point, and I've spent a lot of time messing around with the various systems and making more than a few mistakes along the way. So, I wanted to put together this video to give you a better understanding of what Aniimo is about and share what I wish I knew before playing. Also, quick disclaimer, this isn't going to cover every single system in the game. I have separate videos in the works to dive a little deeper into each system. This video is just to introduce you to some of what Aniimo has to offer and give you an idea of what to be looking out for once you get your hands on the game. With that out of the way, my first tip is to get comfortable controlling your favorite Aniimo. While you do technically have the option of sending your Aniimo off to battle while you watch from the sidelines, by far the most effective way of handling tougher encounters is through twining with your Aniimo and controlling them directly. Although it sounds simple enough, each Aniimo actually controls a bit different in terms of their movement and attack speeds. So, before you start investing in an Aniimo you find cool design-wise, I'd highly recommend twining with them first to see if how they control matches your vibe and playstyle. A quick example I had for myself was Blazin. When I first saw his design, I thought he looked sick, and I figured I would try and build a team around him. However, once I got him, I quickly discovered that I actually really don't like playing as him. His movement speed and attacks were just a bit too slow for my taste. So, I opted to use the Aniimo Fen main instead, who boasted a much more mobile playstyle. All that to say, try twining with an Aniimo before dedicating a bunch of resources to them to make sure you actually like playing as them. Moving on, although it's way too early to think about optimizing teams, it still helps to have an idea of how the Aniimo devs want you to think when it comes to team building. As such, another tip is that when you first start playing, I'd recommend finding 3 DPS Aniimo that you like and building them up. Now, I wouldn't just pick any 3 DPS Aniimo. Ideally, you'll be picking 3 that have complementary elements. This is due to how one of the systems, the Hollow Battle Sim, requires you to have at least 3 complementary DPS in order to challenge the 3 different levels in order to receive rewards, and most importantly, held items to power up your Aniimo. Honestly, based off the newly introduced Hollow Battle Interlink mode, you'll actually want to have enough Aniimo built to cover every element. However, that's a pretty tall order right at the start, so at least by having grass, water, and fire covered, you can, at minimum, farm for items and runes to power up your team. Oh, also, sidebar. The reason I mentioned prioritizing DPS and break units first is that they'll be the ones on field for the longest. Most healers aren't on field long enough to matter, so you can get away with using the same one for a bit, and most support buffs are static, meaning they don't necessarily get stronger with levels or stats, so you don't need to spend a ton of resources on them early. So basically, the TLDR is if you want to optimize your resources like leveling gems, you'll want to mostly be focusing on your elemental DPS first, then a break Aniimo of that element in order to maximize your damage by giving you big break windows. Then, as you progress, you can start bringing your support and healers up to speed as well. And on that note, here's a picture of the type chart so that you can get an idea of which 3 elements you'd like to match together. Remember, you're looking to have an elemental advantage over at least grass, water, and fire between your 3 elements. Then on a related note, this next tip is pretty straightforward, but don't neglect the resident system for your favorite Aniimo. If you played any of the popular gacha games, you can kind of think of residents like ascending your Aniimo. To progress in Animo's resident stages, you'll need species-specific crystals obtained from catching that species of Aniimo, and then Astronite shards that you can obtain by spending daily energy to open boss chests. As you ascend in Aniimo, it'll gain some slight stat boosts, but the real power from resonance comes from how it gives your guys capability points. I'll be touching on this a bit more in-depth in a later video, but the TLDR is that capability points are kind of like Animo's version of Pokemon's EVs. Put another way, they let you specialize your Animo stats even further, which can make a big difference in the long run. The next tip is to not hyperinvest into one Aniimo or comp too early. Now, this might sound counterintuitive with the previous tip, but let me explain. There are a number of systems that go into strengthening your Aniimo: leveling, resonance, held items, you get it. However, there are also some systems, namely the grade potentials, personalities, and traits, that are a bit trickier to get right but can drastically improve an Animo's performance. Again, I'm not diving too deep into those systems now, otherwise this video will get way too long. So that breakdown is coming in a separate video. So subscribe if you don't want to miss it. But I bring these up because grade potentials, personalities, and traits are all determined when you catch the Aniimo. So if you just start hyperinvesting into the first Aniimo you catch of that species, you might be missing out on a lot of power, and you'd have to spend some harder to find resources in order to make that up later. Furthermore, completing world exploration and your Anilog can both make it easier to find Aniimo with higher tiers of grade potentials more easily. And because these methods unlock later, I wouldn't worry too much about building your perfect Aniimo right off the bat. Just get something passable in the meantime, like a good or elite Aniimo with the rare trait you need. Moving on, this next tip switches gears a little bit, but don't discount the Homeland feature. For starters, it's pretty nice to have a player housing / farming sim system built into the game. But the real kicker is that it can also be utilized to give you some extra power. More specifically, there are special RV decorations that can give boost to Aniimo of a given element, and the materials to craft these decorations are earned by completing requests in your homeland. As a sidebar, I also wouldn't sell any collectibles you find in the overworld either, as sometimes those are what you'll need to complete those special requests. With that being said, this last tip is a bit different, but seriously, take your time. Games like Aniimo are really easy to burn yourself out with if you don't have the right mindset going in. So unless it's like your thing, I wouldn't worry about rushing to be the best in PvP or get the strongest Aniimo. Just take your time and enjoy the experience. As I always say, it's just a game and games are meant to be enjoyed. So stop and smell the roses, literally. Now, as a reminder, all the information here is taken from the second closed beta, so that does mean it's subject to change by the full release. That being said, of course I'll have updated tips ready to go for you guys when that time comes, so if you don't want to miss them, don't forget to subscribe. As I mentioned earlier, I also have an Aniimo building guide coming soon that will go much more in depth at explaining the various systems that go into building Aniimo, so be on the lookout for that one. And that about wraps up today's video. Let me know in the comments what you're most excited about for Aniimo, and most importantly, have a blessed day.